Today's video is about writing a story. Here are some tips on how to write a story. Let's talk about paragraphs first. A good story should consist of an introduction, a main body, and a conclusion. In the introduction, which is the first paragraph, we should set the scene. And that means that we have to write about when the story happened, who was involved in the story, what happened, and where it happened. It's important to write it in an interesting way so that the readers can imagine the scene. So try to catch their attention. In the main body, you need to describe the events in the order they happened. These linking phrases might be useful. Before, eventually, meanwhile, as soon as, suddenly, after a while. But try to learn some more. They are very important. The conclusion. Here, you write about what happened at the end of the story. You may write about people's feelings and reactions. This is an example. I couldn't believe that it was over. Let's talk about how to begin and how to end a story. To begin a story, you can describe the weather, the surroundings, the feelings, the people. Let's have a look at some examples. It was a dark, stormy night. Tired and exhausted, Meg started walking through the woods. Jim pushed open the old door and looked inside. I had never seen a ghost, but like they say, there is a first time for everything. Try to imagine how you would continue writing these stories. You can also use direct speech or a rhetorical question. Direct speech is when you write what somebody else has actually said. For example, "What have you done?" the headmaster shouted. You write that between speech marks. And here's an example of a rhetorical question. A rhetorical question is a question you ask only to make a statement, not to get an answer. Have you ever been trapped in a lift? Again, try to think how you would continue writing these stories. Now, to end a story, you can also use direct speech or a rhetorical question. I must have been dreaming, he said. Isn't it true that love is blind? You may describe feelings about or reactions to the events. Here are two examples. We were relieved when we saw the police car. Back in my room, I felt confused about everything that had happened. Now let's talk about the past tenses. When you write a story, you usually write it in the past. So you can use different past tenses in your story. For example, past simple. You use past simple to write about actions which started and ended in the past, or action which happened one after the other in the past. For example, I walked into the room, then I realized. Another tense is past continuous. We use it to write about actions in progress at a certain time in the past. The example, I was walking home when I saw. You can continue. And the last one, past perfect. We use it to write about actions which happened before other past actions. For example, when I arrived, Peter had already packed. Let's see other tips. Some tips that will make your story more interesting. First, you should use different adjectives. Here are some: amazing, terrific, enormous, fabulous, tiny, attractive, wicked. You can also use others: happily, extremely, absolutely, quietly, carefully, seriously. And verbs. You know some very simple verbs like look, speak, and walk. But try to learn new verbs. For example, stare. To stare at somebody is to look at somebody or something for a long time. Now think about whisper. To whisper is to speak very quietly to somebody so that other people cannot hear what you're saying. And what about crawl? Crawl is to move forward on your hands and knees. So try to learn new verbs. You can also use similes. That means you can describe people or things by comparing them to someone or something else. She was as brave as a lion. They fought like cats and dogs. That night I slept like a log. His love for her was as deep as the ocean. And the last tip, you can also use present and past participle. Look at these two examples. Turning on the lights. Turning is the present participle. It's a verb that ends in ing. The next example, exhausted. She decided to stop searching and go back home. Exhausted is the past participle of exhaust, and it's the third column on the list of verbs. This is a quote by Stephen King. If you want to be a writer, you must do two things, above all others: read a lot and write a lot. Try to practice these tips. They will help you to write good stories.